You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Learning Leader Spotlight podcast, sponsored by Training Pros. At Training Pros, we're proud to connect organizations with exceptional learning and development consultants and professionals while celebrating the leaders who are shaping the future of our industry. Today, I'm excited to welcome Joseph Stoup, Director of the Learning Experience Group at RealPage. Joe leads an organization responsible for content development, content management, and content delivery, helping customers maximize the value of RealPage's software through innovative learning experiences. In our prep conversation, I was struck by Joe's thoughtful perspective on AI, customer education, and something I know we'll all explore today, how we continue putting people at the center of learning while technology rapidly evolves. So, Joe, welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be able to talk today.
Great. So, to get us started, can you share with our audience a 60-second overview of what you do?
Sure. Okay. You're not going to do a stopwatch, are you?
No.
Okay. I tend to go long. So,
That is just
um,
fine.
that's great. I'm really lucky in my role. I get to see work with our teams, everything from content development to content delivery and our learning systems group. So I have a team that does the content development, our instructional designers, if you will. And then I have our content management team that oversees making sure that our content is fresh, it's up to date, it's working well for our customers, really kind of that sweet spot to make sure that our health score is healthy, if you will, making sure that our customers are getting the best content and content, like I said, that's up to date. And then I have the content delivery, which is our learning systems group. Really, we provide an LMS option for our customers as well as a content subscription so that we can work with any LMS out there. I'm really blessed to be able to work with amazing people throughout the day and get to oversee that whole life cycle.
That's wonderful. I also, I think, found it fascinating during our initial conversation on how your team brings together these functions that traditionally don't always work together. I mean, what advantages has that created for you?
It's really given us a strategic advantage to be able to really open up those channels of communication where previously our content delivery team sat underneath a different function, and bringing them in with us really allowed us to work better together because they get a lot of the feedback from our customers outside of our surveys that we do at the end of content. They're really engaged with our customers. We have a team that we're standing up called our learning advisors that work with our customers that have our LMS or maybe one of our content subscriptions to make sure that we're delivering learning paths that work for their organization, that the content is working well for what they need. So really bringing those three functions together have been a great opportunity for us to really focus on our care of our customer and making sure that our content is there from the customer's perspective, not just the business's perspective of, hey, we need this training, because we get a lot
Sure.
of those requests,
Of course.
the Dumias, if as kind of what I call Dumia training. And we try our best from our content development side to look and say, well, what's the purpose of this? But as we, look at in professional training and in adult training, a lot of those requests come and you just do it because, somebody says, hey, we're going to do this training. But really, with the three teams together, we have that whole life cycle, and it really gives us an opportunity to give true meaning to our training from the customer's perspective. It's a great opportunity.
That's wonderful. I mean, that really truly is customer focus, which is
Yes.
which is great. And also you're changing some of the titles, which is what I'm finding in the industry is kind of happening right now with AI, and the roles are changing a bit, but the titles are really changing around them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what first attracted you to learning and development? Like what has kept you passionate about the field over the years?
I came into learning development kind of sideways. I think like a lot of people do. I didn't go to school for learning development. I went to school for computer science. And then I was running help desks. And, help desks are that ultimate point in time need for training. hey, I don't know how to do this, or
Yep.
this is not working how I want it to. Sometimes it's true broken functionality, but a lot of it is a how to, opportunity. And then I was given a unique opportunity to come in and run an LMS for our local utility company. And that really started me into learning and development because I'm a naturally curious guy. I want to know more about things. I started to go down the path of, well, how does the human brain learn this content? And that led me into doing instructional design in my role. So I became an instructional designer as well as an LMS admin. And I really started to enjoy that moment where the aha happens. You see that when a learner goes, oh, I get it now. I think a lot of us in this role, in these
The light
roles,
bulb. Yes,
the light
yes.
bulb. Yeah, the light bulb moment that now all of a sudden we're like, oh, that was great. I helped build something that really brings on that light bulb moment. That really has been a motivation for me, even as I've, risen to a director level role. I still love that aha moment. I still love to do the creative piece. I love to get in and design and do all of those things. I've also gained a lot of understanding about the full learning experience. It's not just about the content, but also about how the learner accesses it. Is it an easy access? Is it something that we didn't frustrate them before they even get to the actual learning event?
Hmm.
And then, we have the team development side. And now in my role, I really feel like it's my job to raise up the next generation of instructional designers, of LMS admins, of learning advisors, of content management. Like that's where I am now, to help bring up that next role, prepare them well for this
Mhm.
world that's rapidly changing, and really, keep everyone up to speed as much as possible, and let them know what's coming up as our the role of learning development changes with AI.
Oh, that's wonderful. And speaking of how the profession has evolved, what are the most impactful changes that you've seen in learning and development over the past few years?
A lot of people have been focused on the utilization of AI in the learning development process. How do instructional designers use AI to create content quicker? How do we scale solutions faster? How do we train AI on our collective knowledge to make sure that it's giving the right answers? All of those have really impacted our world. The place where I think that we need to pivot to is we need to start to look at AI interactions as a great source of information about what our learners need. As we start to mine AI interactions and learning for what questions are being asked, where are our common pain points, it really gives us almost an unprecedented look into what learners are asking about. The things that used to be, hey, let me tap my coworker on the shoulder, now are happening within AI, and that information can be mined. And I think that's probably one of the greatest opportunities that we have in front of us.
Yeah, I agree. And mining it is the key, right? Gathering that data so that you can use that. That's important.
Absolutely.
So I think as we talk about the changes and what you've seen, on the flip side, where do you see the learning and development space headed over the next, I would normally say 3 to 5 years, but since it's changing so fast, maybe the next 2 to 3 years?
I think that we're going to see our role fundamentally change, and I can't predict where AI is going to take us. I think that there's probably going to be some organizations are going to think, oh, I don't need that instructional design expertise. Any of my SMEs can create quality training just by utilizing AI. I can create job aids very, very quickly. However, our role isn't just to create content. It's really to be that learning voice within an organization. And the organizations that are like, oh, well, SLEs can do it now, they're going to start to have a catalog of 3,000 learnings that aren't going to work together, that don't really drive to what a learner needs. And I think that we're going to see a slow move away from instructional design and then a really fast pivot back to instructional design. And that's where, our value statement really needs to be, in that we're not just creating content. It's not just about creating pretty things. It's about the intentional creation of learning objectives, testing for those learning objectives, and then the instructional content that fills in the between there to make sure that people are coming up to speed. And I think that we'll be a lot more involved in the onboarding of people, that initial knowledge creation for them, if you will, that initial productivity that ultimately occurs, because that's ultimately in a customer focused space, that's ultimately what I'm focused on. I'm focused on, can our customers get their employees to productivity as fast as possible, right?
Hmm.
When they buy
Yeah.
our software, I want their employees to be able to use it now. And that comes through an intentional process of building out that knowledge creation, the knowledge scaffolding of, I know this, now I can add on to that, and I can build that into, reality that I experience so that those memories become more locked into my long-term memory, and all of that builds in. So I know I've kind of wandered away from the initial question of where's it going, but I think that those core functionalities are going to become really important. And I think that there's going to become a real role around AI training. I recently posted on LinkedIn that if we spent as much time worrying about giving humans the knowledge in the right way as we do in giving AI knowledge in the right way, I think learning and development would be in a very different space. Organizations are all focused on how do we train AI? How do we train AI? And we've lost focus on how do we train our employees? How do we train our customers? And I think that we're going to eventually see a pivot back towards that human focused training as
Yeah.
well as the AI training, because it's really hard for a person to sit down at a computer in a brand new job and say into AI, what do I need to know? Because there's a lot of context that exists. Every
Exactly.
job is different, the expectation for every role. And until we somehow, as corporate learning development, figure out how to give AI all of that context, that's going to be very hard for AI to answer. AI is great in answering the just in time
Well,
support. I'm here, what do I do? What's my next click? It's great at helping out with creativity. It's, here's my
sure.
initial outline, help me flush this out. It's a really great partner. Debbie Richards, who's on LinkedIn, you've probably seen her
Yes.
posts. She talks about the AI sandwich. And this is where ultimately, getting back to your question, where I think we're going to end up in the sweet spot, which is human, AI, human. And when
Sure.
we're there, I think organizations are going to have the best result and the best productivity boosts and all of those things from utilization of AI when it's wrapped in a human sandwich, if you will.
I love that analogy, the human sandwich. And it really, gets you focused on embedding learning into AI experiences instead of simply just delivering the answers.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Well, with technology is obviously changing quickly, but leadership still matters just as much. So, who has been your most influential professional mentor?
I had a director many, many years ago. I learned a really valuable lesson from her that still impacts me today. And, she became my boss. She was a director of corporate communications. They didn't really know what to do with the learning and development team, so they put us underneath her, and she came in. And when I approach a problem, I tend to try a solution and see how it works. And her name was Linda. And Linda didn't like that approach. Linda wanted to get all of the information up front and then carefully craft a solution. So I would walk into Linda's office. I'd be, Linda, hey, listen, I just tried this thing and here's the result. And she would kind of cringe and start asking me about all the information that I had before and how did I know? And well, it was a gut decision. Like I just decided and I tried it. And this became a point of contention for Linda and I. And Linda did a really good job of starting to explain to me how she processed information and how she needed information. And with that, I was able to start to adjust how I managed up. And I think that managing up is like ultimately one of the greatest career skills you can have. When you look at your leader and figure out how to manage upwards, not just downwards, you become a much better employee. And I think you become a much better leader because now you start to understand how to also manage down to some extent. Linda really worked hard with me to make sure that I started to give her the information that allowed her to best support me in my decisions. So I learned to start to gather what was a gut reaction to me to information, to start to gather that information and why I thought the decision was the right thing and to lay that out with her. Ultimately, I became a much better employee and I think I'm a much better leader because I understand how people gather information in different ways. That became a great mentorship relationship with Linda. She's one of the greatest leaders I've ever had because we became quite close, going through that rough time and coming out the other side. She retired many years ago, and I still miss having her as my boss. But just learning that skill, I think, is an important thing that she taught me throughout the years.
That's a great skill and what a great relationship, and it's wonderful when you say, "I miss working with somebody like that."
Yeah,
It really exemplifies their leadership, so it makes and like you said,
absolutely.
shows helps you become the great leader you are.
Well, I do my best. We'll go from there.
I know it's definitely influenced the way you lead your team, so,
Absolutely, it
so
is.
that ties nicely into my next question. What do you think is the most important skill in talent right now?
Curiosity is the most important thing. As we look at the evolving nature of our roles and the evolving nature of organizations as a whole, and we see new things coming online, being curious about AI, being curious about the changing nature of our work is really, really important. Something that I do with my team, we have about 32 ish people on the team. I give everyone an hour a week minimum for personal development, and I ask them to block that off on their calendar. And I don't care if they listen to a podcast while going for a walk, I don't care if they read blogs, I don't care if they're on YouTube. I don't care if they're taking a formal e-learning. The mechanism doesn't matter. The importance is that they are trying to grow. And I've asked them, well, I've suggested to them that I would focus on AI because this is something that is, obviously impacting all facets of life at this point. And that's a way that I encourage them to be curious, to be learning, because when we're curious, I think we move into that learning mindset, you know,
Mhm.
and I'm sure we've all heard of the growth mindset, and this is a way to get the brain triggered into that growth mindset because when we're curious, we have questions and we approach problems differently when we're like, oh, this is a problem. What caused that problem? What are my potential options? We don't have to be as gut reactionary necessarily, and especially with change. So I think, that's probably the number one skill right now is being curious, and being open to questioning why things are happening, how things are happening, who it's happening to. If you go through that who, what, when, how, why, you know,
Yes.
questioning framework, I think that you learn a lot more about the things in front of you.
Oh, exactly, and that helps also with all those orders that come in, um, that, you need to ask the questions on to see if it really is a training problem, right?
Absolutely,
Helps you
yes.
with that too. So I think when we were talking initially, you mentioned something about a quote from Simon Sinek. In a world built for scale and speed, we're building an organization of care. And I remember you saying that too. So in addition to being curious, there's also this focus on care that I found that you were also really, focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably, I think, the greatest human quality right now. And that quote comes, he was interviewing Jesse, and I forget his last name, the owner of Savannah Bananas. And they're talking through how the Savannah Bananas are building out great experiences at the ballpark. It's not just about watching a fun game where people do dances, and catch the ball funny, but every experience from buying a hot dog to walking to your seat is something that has an opportunity for care about those people. Simon Sinek says, like you said, I'm really impressed that in a world built for speed and scale, you're focused on care. And that is something that we're focused on at RealPage. You see that with our standing up of our learning advisors, looking at our customers and saying, okay, for our people who buy our LMS, what are they going through? Going through it's called an empathy map. It's a pretty widely utilized tool that we utilize all the time. So we figured out what are the pressures on these people, and we realized from above them, they're getting pressures to train more people, to do it faster, right? To have better results. From below them, they're getting the pressure of, I don't have time to take training. This training isn't appropriate for me. So how do we partner with those people? Usually they're training managers within an apartment organization, property management organization. Normally, they might be a director. They're not someone who is a learning admin. They're not a learning systems admin. But how do we help them architect our LMS, our learning paths, to be able to come up with the results that they need for the up above while keeping it appropriate for the people that need to take the training? And it's that kind of care for the person. 'Cause ultimately, that comes out great in a business relationship because they know that we care about them.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's about the individual. How do we help you, not in a, oh, we're here to sell you something,
Yeah.
but how do we help you because we care about the experience that you're going through? And I think that is probably the number one human trait, as we talk about it. And as we bring that into the working world, everyone wants to do it faster, to do it better, to do it across a wider swath. That's the scale part. And when we can do those things, but still focus on the care of the people that we're working with, I think that is a secret sauce that if you can perfect that allows you to have high performing teams of people that are doing great things. And just bragging on my team real quick, I mean, I'm impressed. I have 30 people, and we don't have cultural infighting. We don't have arguments, because we've set a culture of care of the individual and the team as a whole. And because of that, I think that we've really brought in amazing people with really good skill sets that are doing great work. My favorite thing about my team is nobody sits and says, well, that's not my job. People say, oh, how could we do this better? I see a problem. I'm going to think about how to fill that need. They don't come to me and say, hey, Joe, is it okay if I fill that need? They don't go to their manager. They work on it, and all of a sudden they bring it to their manager and it's like, hey, here's the solution. And then that manager brings it to me, and I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, I wasn't even recognizing that gap, but you did, and you built out an entire solution for it. Congratulations. And that's where we get people who are amazing and well focused, but that becomes possible when they feel safe and cared for.
That is so heartwarming, and I love to hear that focus on care. That's really what makes it all like that you said, the culture of care, and giving them that hour a week to develop themselves also, I think, creates that line of questioning and thinking outside the box. And so I know you let them use whatever tool or medium that they choose. What is your favorite source for industry news and information?
I'm probably a little bit weird in this. A lot of people are going to say, on td.org or, Training Pros or, LinkedIn. Mine's Google Scholar. I'm a real believer in looking at the science behind how the human brain processes information. And Google Scholar allows me to look at, the latest research, because a lot of our research, a lot of the things that we base our development on is based on research that was done in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe into the 80s. You look at Bloom's taxonomy, you look at Mager's stuff, you look at Gagne's, 9 events. Like all of that is based on really old research. But there are people who are actively doing research right now that you can go out to Google Scholar and do some searching. And this is where I love utilizing AI in my real life, because sometimes reading those papers is a lot like reading, the fine print of your end user license, right?
Right? Yeah.
It's
A little,
very dry.
yes, it's very dry.
But you can take that paper and throw it into AI and say, hey, listen, I'm a director of learning experience at RealPage, which my AI knows at this point. You know,
Hmm.
what insights might I be able to draw out of this, and what's the evidence to back it? I also
Mm,
ask things like, how big was the group that this,
good question.
this research
Hmm.
was done at? Is it 10 people? Is it 200? Is it 2,000? Because I tend to look at, that lends to credibility for me. And then AI helps me to draw out insights so that I can compare and contrast that against some of the things that we have, as kind of cultural norms in the learning and development space.
I don't hear Google Scholar very often, but it really fits with your evidence-based approach to learning. And finally, what is the one book that everyone wanting to move into L&D leadership should read?
Okay, well, you just said it, and I have it sitting right here. It's the Evidence Informed Learning Design by Miriam Nealon and Paul Krishner. A lot of us get into learning and development because we are naturally curious. We like that light bulb moment. We want to help people. We care for people, kind of wrapping in everything that we've talked about. And not everyone goes to school to learn, instructional design from, an accredited university. And I'm one of those people. I have a whole bunch of books behind me that I've read, but I haven't taken a single test on instructional design, to certify me well, I guess I am certified in a couple of things, but looking at evidence-based research helps us to make sure that when we are making leadership decisions, when we're setting the course for how we're going to lead an L&D organization, we're doing it based upon real information, not myths. One of the myths, this book talks about myths a lot, and one of the myths it talks about is learning styles. And this is some people's sacred cow, so I apologize. I may make some people really, really mad. You can go on LinkedIn and message me and tell me how wrong I am. I'm totally okay with that. But learning styles and learning preferences for the learning styles has been scientifically disproven multiple times. Human beings learn through every single mechanism that we talk about. They listen, they learn through reading, they learn through listening, they learn through experience. All of the mechanisms are ways that the human brain takes in information. Some people are like, oh, I'm a visual learner. Then they go on TikTok and they watch, 1,000 TikToks and take nothing away from any of them. They can spend an hour there. My wife can tell you that, I will tell you that I'm an auditory learner, and she can talk to me for 10 minutes and I may not process any of that information. People who are experiential, well, they went through their entire primary education years not experiencing, unless they went through a Montessori program. Like a teacher stood in front of the room and talked to you the entire time,
Yep.
and you managed to graduate.
Yep.
Congratulations.
What
You
did they
know,
learn? We don't know, but
that's part of the
they're
problem
being
with
talked
primary
at.
education, right?
Yeah.
We won't even get started on
No,
that.
we won't.
That's a whole different podcast. But those are the myths that kind of that sink into our L&D culture. And well, we have to make sure that we're designing for all these different learning styles. And you know what the reality is you need to choose the best mechanism for your information, because that's what's going to work the best. How does this experience best work? For us, we're talking about software training. We can sit and tell people all day long about it until they get in and actually work through it and try it out. That's when the real learning happens. When a trainer can stand in front of a classroom and walk someone through and they are working, now there's some muscle memory, some opportunity to
Exactly.
practice that afterwards, doing some spaced learning concepts, like all of these things that are actually science based. That's where true learning and ultimately long-term memory formation comes in. It's not just short-term recall, where asking a quiz right after a training, isn't necessarily indicative of performance long term. But and again, we could go into all
We
of these
we
things
could, and
long
we're
term.
running out of
Yeah,
time.
I know. So,
This is
but
fascinating. Yes,
yeah, yeah.
it's fascinating, but you have so much to share, especially around learning experiences. So thank you. Was there a final wrap up you wanted to say?
I think what we get to do is really, in my belief, a privilege. We get to help people learn things, We get to help adults become better at their jobs. We get to help adults. We're teaching sometimes an old dog new tricks. And those that's really a privilege that we get to do. I really think that that's a fun and exciting way to get to spend our 40 to 50 hours a week helping people do that. So I guess that's kind of my wrap up.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent, Joe. And yes, we could talk for hours. We'll have to continue this conversation, but thank you
Absolutely.
thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and insights.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know our listeners will walk away with some valuable ideas to think about. The names of your resources will be at the end of the show as well, so they can find that. And there's just some great ways to embrace AI thoughtfully to leading with care and keeping learners at the center of everything we do, which is, I think, one of your key messages. What I would like to say is that as a small thank you for being our guest, Training Pros will be planting 5 trees in your honor through our reforestation initiative. It's one of the ways we like to give back and recognize the learning leaders who generously share their time and expertise with our community.
Well, that's great.
And thank you to everyone listening to another episode of the Learning Leaders Spotlight podcast, sponsored by Training Pros. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, share this episode with a colleague, and connect with us on LinkedIn for future conversations with learning leaders who are shaping the future of our profession, like Joe. Until next time, thanks for listening and keep learning.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.